And I'm David Epstein. I'm from NAEVR, and Women's Eye Health is one of our contributing organizations. I'll first let you know some of the things that we've been doing over the past year, just in terms of our general activities, before I talk about the current funding situation. 2013 is just wrapped up in terms of fiscal year appropriations, but we were pretty busy. We were testifying on the Hill a number of times. If you want to go to our first content slide. We got the DOD, not only do we get funding for vision research from the NIH, but we also get it from the DOD. So the Vision Trauma Research Program did announce $14 million worth of awards to 21 researchers. Let's see. For those of you who know Jim likes a lot of content in here. If after I'm done, if you have any questions, please come down to our booth. We're on the Sky Bridge right near ARVO Central. And I'll be glad to go into any more detail if anyone has any questions or wants to just talk about anything that's going on in DC. We had 3 deliverables, 3 publications we put out last year. The Silver Book, which is a compendium of eye and vision data, disease and cost data. We put out a study on the cost of military blindness. We thought that would help our advocacy efforts on Capitol Hill to know, they know the human cost of war, but they should know the economic cost of war, and in particular the economic cost of military eye trauma. The top line figure is $25 billion. That's the costs that have been incurred, both in healthcare costs already incurred, and projected economic costs to the U.S. society of these eye and vision trauma to these young men and women. Their economic costs, lost productivity, lost wages. And we also put out a brochure, an educational brochure for Congress, everything to do with eye and vision research being done at the DOD. So we were very active last year, and again, if those of you know Jim Dorkowski, that's how Jim likes to act. The Audacious Goals Initiative, which the NEI is working on, we're very involved with that. If you want to go to the next slide. That was just announced last winter. 10 awards of $3,000 each to winners of the Audacious Goals Initiative. We've been very involved with that as well. I think Paul Sieving spoke earlier today about the Audacious Goals Initiative. I don't know if anyone was at it at the meeting, but he was going to give more details about how the NEI plans to go forward with the Audacious Goals Initiative. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so now this has the numbers for the NEI. You can see the middle one is FY 2013's NEI getting $706 million. That's not what they're getting. That's what they would have gotten if not for the sequester, which I will now explain. Sequester was an agreement reached about 2 years ago between Congress and the White House to reduce the deficit during one of their last manufactured crises. It's basically a way for them to force deficit reduction. Congress and the President agreed that if they couldn't come up with a way to reduce the deficit by a certain amount of money, whether new taxes or targeted spending cuts, automatic across-the-board spending cuts would go into effect. The thought being that was a drastic and ineffective way of doing things that would never go into effect, which of course meant that's what happened. So the final NEI number is actually going to be roughly $662 million for FY 2013. That's a cut of about $35 million. Or, as Paul Sieving will tell you, maybe 90 grants. The way they plan on implementing that is not by cutting 90 grants, it's by cutting every grant roughly 5.7%. So that is where the FY 2013 ended up being at. It's roughly $662 million. They really won't know until the end of the fiscal year when they've actually given out all their money and they know what they actually had to give out. But he estimates, the NEI estimates roughly $662 million is the final amount, which is roughly where they were about 10 years ago, to put that perspective. So it's actually as drastic as, and here's the kicker. Sequestration wasn't a one-time thing. It's a 10-year thing. You have 9 more years of it. So every year, if Congress can't come up with a way to cut the deficit by a certain amount of money, whether through targeted spending cuts and or new revenues, they have to go across the board, more spending cuts. So we are not thrilled with that. It's not how things are supposed to work. And
is it a 2% cut?
non-defense spending is going to cut about 5.7%. Defense spending is cut about 9%, 8 point something percent. Non-defense spending is going to be cut about 5% across the board. Every year for the next 10 years, unless they find a different way to cut the deficit. So as you can imagine, NAEVR is not, and the rest of the medical research community, we're not taking this lying down. We are very motivated. We're working with lots of different groups, because this is not how things are supposed to work, and especially medical research should not be cut by this kind of amount when healthcare costs are rising, when the aging of the population means that more people will be, as you know, as Dr. Chen said, suffering from eye disease, which predominantly hits the older population, especially women. So we are not taking this lying down. We will be very active on the Hill, and we will probably be engaging a lot more members of the Eye and Vision Research community to contact the members of Congress, which is what you were saying, is that Congress needs to hear, and not just from the lobbyists, and not even just from the researchers. They need to hear from the people with these diseases that their productivity, their quality of life, their economic contribution to the economy and to society is going to be negatively impacted by these cuts. So this is just the start. This is not the end of the process. This is just the start. This is the start of the fight. Because we're not going to just say, oh, well, that's how things are going to work. So we're very active. ARVO's been very active. They had a lobby day back in January. Some people in this room have done lobby days for us in the past. Dr. Copeland has done one. Dr. Chen, you've done. It's been a while. We've seen you in D.C. But I can tell you the ARVO, the AMPC met in D.C. back in January. We were up on the Hill. This was before the sequestration went into effect. Unfortunately, despite our efforts to prevent it, it did go into effect, but we are being very active, and the AMPC and the Board of Trustees and the ARVO Advocacy Committee is working on this. I think that's something that they're also going to be working on, is how to engage the public more in advocacy. Again, as you say in DC, we know in DC, the most effective lobbyists for research aren't the researchers, it's the people wearing those pink ribbons. Congress hears from them. Congress needs to hear from people with eye disease. Say, hey, my life is being affected by having this disease. And if we can get that kind of increased activity, I think we would be a bit more successful. Because the people with the pink ribbons are very successful. They're motivated. Those researchers don't have to ask for dollars, because it's the people with the pink ribbons asking for them. And they're very effective. So, but we're active with the rest of the research community. We're up on the Hill testifying. We were selected to testify. Dr. Hendrik Scholl from Wilmer was selected to testify for the second year in a row before the House Appropriations Committee that writes these bills. To be selected 2 years in a row is an honor. It does not happen very often. Lots of groups ask to testify, and they only select a few. To be selected 2 years in a row gets our message up there. The chairman of the subcommittee, Jack Kingston, not only, he's not running for the U.S. Senate, but he mentioned at the hearing his father was afflicted with AMD. And that's the kind of thing we like to hear. When we hear a member of Congress saying, Mike, someone important to me had this disease you're talking about, that helps our message. So we're up on the Hill, we're lobbying, and unfortunately we're still fighting. Sequestration is drastic, and we're going to do everything we can to prevent it from happening next year. Do you want to go to the next slide? There is the BRAIN Initiative. I don't know how many of you have heard about this. The President announced it in his State of the Union address. A $100 million fund to study the brain. $40 million of it will come from the NIH. That'll be their contribution. NAEVR is already working to get an advisory committee from ARVO to help contribute, to help guide them, to make sure that this initiative includes vision and vision researchers when they're figuring out how they're going to proceed. So I believe there are, Dr. Stevens said, 4 people on the committee are from the vision community. On the BRAIN Initiative, the steering committee are from vision. So vision will be part of this without a doubt. A lot of other stuff in there on grants management. Jim Jorkowski is probably much more suited to discuss them in detail than I am, so I won't even try. But if you have any questions, again, please come down to our booth. Jim is much more capable of.
How many
explaining.
people are on that committee?
I think 15.
Oh,
I
okay.
think we were told, I think Dr. Stevens said 15 people, and 4 have a vision connection.
Mhm.
That's pretty good. Go to the next slide. We are up on the hill doing our AEVR briefings. Vicki Wynn from Hopkins up on the right talked about her vision research that's funded by the Department of Defense. She's doing modeling of how IED blasts affect the eye. Now, we do a lot of briefings on the Hill. A lot of them are very scientific, and a lot of times, to be honest, Hill staff probably doesn't understand what the science is about. I can assure you they understood her modeling briefing because it's about how a blast hits the face, how it affects the eye. They understand that. Hill staff said to me afterwards, I got this. I understand this, because it will help lead to the development of better protective gear. And if one thing Congress likes to hear is not how you're going to treat a disease, they like to hear how you're going to prevent a disease or prevent an injury. So this was a great briefing. I think the Hill staff who came really got it. We also had Dr. Gaddy Wallstein from Pittsburgh up talking about his work on glaucoma with OCT scanning. That was also a very well-attended briefing, and we have more planned for the rest of the year. We do our AMD briefing in the fall. We're doing a reception in July to mark AEVR's 20th anniversary. Just as a note, since we have someone here from Doheny, NAEVR's founding president, Dr. Stephen Ryan, just passed away a week ago. I don't know how many of you had heard. I mean, the ARVO has been publicizing, so we're pretty sad about that. I've known him for about 7 years now. I work with AEVR, and he will be missed. It's really too bad, but we're going to continue his work and his fight. He was very active in D.C. He would come and testify. He would come with members of Congress. He had a good relationship with Senator Tom Harkin of Iowa. So we are going to be up on the Hill. We're going to still be educating. We're still advocating. Defense research, going on the next slide. This is where I have some good news to report, which is why I save it for the end. I like to leave on a high note. I learned from Hollywood, from Vegas. Always go out on a high note. This is the only new source of funding for vision research. Any eyes being cut, this is increasing. In this program is about 5 years old now. We've never gotten more than $4 million in any one fiscal year. In 2013, we got it up to $10 million. That's being cut because of the sequester to about $9.2 million. That is still more than twice as much as we've ever gotten in one fiscal year. We are very happy about that. And not only that, we'll get 9.2 million, but this program usually gets transfers over from other DoD research programs. So the actual dollar amount for this year's program will probably be closer to $14 million. That's what I've been told from my contacts up in Fort Detrick, Maryland, who run this at Tatrick, which is the agency that runs this program. This is the only new source of dollars for medical research. When the eyes being cut, this is going up. And Jim and I are screaming from the rooftops. If you or any of your colleagues does any research which might address the research gaps identified by this program, apply. We're doing our regular Monday morning briefing tomorrow, 7:30, up in 6E. Please come, hear about the opportunities, hear about the program. The program announcement normally would have been announced at ARVO. Usually the timing works out. It's usually the program announcement comes out this time of year. Because of the sequester, that's been pushed back probably to June or July timeframe. Now, if you or anyone wants to know about that release, please get me your email, and when that program announcement comes out, I push out an email to the research community. Or when any other announcement comes out that has any vision component to it, if the DoD is looking for research that might include vision, I push it out to the research community. So please get me names, please get me emails, because if you don't apply, definitely have no shot at the money. So we are up there advocating for FY14 as we speak. We have our champions. We have made it very clear that $10 million is our baseline. No going back to those low $3 or $4 million funding levels. They gave us $10 million last year. We fully expect and are insisting That's what the program gets for 2014. DoD has a lot of money for research. A lot of it, you can certainly question its relevance to the veterans and to our young men and women in combat. There's no question about this program, and we're making clear Congress understands that. We're putting young men and women in harm's way. We have the obligation as a society, and Congress has the obligation as Congress, to make sure they have the best research and the best science available to treat them. So we think we're pretty good on the House side. The Senate side, you mentioned Senator Inouye. He wanted research being done. He was not very cooperative in getting this program funded. The Senate has never funded this program. They've always accepted the House actions, which is not necessarily how, I guess you get the money anyhow. It results, all that matters at the end is the program gets the money. We've been very disappointed in Senator Inouye over the years, and now Senator Durbin's office, they don't seem to be changing that habit. They will accept the House funding levels. They won't actually write a bill that has this $10 million in it. I don't know why. Everyone says they agree with the value of this program, but they simply are content to just let the House take the lead. So, you can see the last bullet point there. Male soldiers aged 20 to 24 account for 90% of 7%. So you're looking at young men coming back, they have 50 years of life left with these injuries, with decreased vision, and decreased visual acuity, with all sorts of visual dysfunction. Right now upstairs in 6E, there's a special first-time defense session, Veterans and TBI going on, that John Clark organized. There's no way anyone can say this is not something that needs to be addressed. When you have 75% upwards of all troops of the TBI have some visual dysfunction. So Congress gets it. We have not had the easiest time getting the funding. We're now getting some good success, getting appropriate funding levels. So again, if you or anyone in your institution is interested in looking at this, get me an email and they'll know all about it. Go to the next slide, has some of the history of how much funding and who's been funded over the years. The next slide has the names of people who got money in the last funding cycle. You can see it's all over the country. Very successful. The next slide, we did a study. We did a cost of military blindness. There's the numbers. They're pretty serious. And Congress gets this. Staffers see this number. They say $25 billion. That was only for the first 10 years of combat. Because everyone knows we're still engaging in combat operations, which means more troops coming home. So that number is only going to go up. So that helps make, it's very easy to make the human argument for this research. This helps us make the economic argument. And the rest is just what we've been doing. We've got support on the Hill. We've got support from the vision research, from the veterans community. And finally, for those of you from Boston, either living in Boston or from Boston, the fact is, right after the bombings, a lot of the research community built on some of the research gained from DoD research to help treat some of the wounded. This was an IED, just because it was in Boston. It had the same characteristics, the same types of wounds as our young men suffer in combat. So that helps us make the argument as well now, because they're funding this research. And it was aimed at young men and women over in Afghanistan and Iraq. Well, unfortunately, we've now seen these types of wounds here in the U.S. So their investment in DoD research is paying off here in the U.S. So, we hate to have that extra bit of support for making our case on the Hill. The fact is, Congress now can see their investment in this research will pay off not only overseas, it's paying off here back in the U.S. So that's pretty much where I stand. I want to leave time for anyone who has any questions. That was happening in D.C. I understand sequestration is complicated. It's complicated for us too, because it's not how things are supposed to work. So if you have any questions about sequestration or anything, please.
Is there an effort between the various agencies and the lobbyists from the various agencies to combine their efforts to try to make the point that the research effort within this country is not only for the health of this country, but worldwide health as well as, for instance, driving economies of pharmaceutical houses, et cetera? Is there a communal effort?
Yeah, I mean, and NAEVR is very active in it. There is a larger research advocacy community that we coordinate our efforts, we coordinate our message. We try to come up with a combined ask to Congress. We all agree on one number to ask Congress for funding levels for the NIH. There is some coordination, without a doubt, and especially with what's going on with sequestration, those efforts are ramping up because these cuts are so drastic. I think everyone is more aware of the need to speak as a larger voice, that, you know, there are lots of institutes at the NIH. If they were all speaking different voices, different message, it wouldn't have the same impact as when we all coordinate our message, coordinate our activities. They coordinate meetings with members of Congress and their staffs, coordinate meetings with NIH institute directors. So yeah, it is a very big part of what we do, is making sure that research advocacy community is speaking together.
It would be nice if we could get pharmaceutical house help in that regard as well.
Without a doubt, you know, Big Pharma has obviously their priorities, and you know, I don't want to speak for them, but yeah, they're a part of it as well, without a doubt. Again, Jim could probably give a bit more detail on how the role they play, since he tends to work more in that part of our activities, NAEVR's activities, but you know, pharmaceutical communities are very involved, either directly or through us, since you know they're one of our funders as well. So you know, we definitely understand, you know, how to communicate their positions. Any more questions about DC?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And want to come by our booth? Please come by if you have any more questions. I know this, unfortunately, our printout, I probably shouldn't have put 4 slides per page, make some of the print too small. Because Jim does try to cram so much onto every slide that some of them may be hard to read. So please, if you want, I have all these documentations, all these documents, all these position papers, all our brochures, everything I've talked about. I have hard copies, I have electronic copies. If you want anything, please come by and please check your emails if you have anything you want to do.